Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to our presentation tonight. My name is Rob Sammons and I work in Special Collections and Archives. We are happy to host the presentation of the book, The Making of an American, the autobiography of a Hungarian immigrant, Appalachian entrepreneur, and OSS officer Martin Himler. This book has been edited by Kathy Cassidy Corbett, with an introduction by Doug Cantrell and a foreword by Charles Spinavisi. We were expecting another speaker, but since he couldn't make it, we're going to skip right on to the main attraction. If you would, please welcome Dr. Doug Cantrell, Professor in History Department at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. He holds degrees from Berea College and UK. Has authored or co-authored or edited 13 books and written numerous articles and book reviews for various academic journals. Wrote entries on immigration for the Kentucky Encyclopedia and the Encyclopedia of Appalachia.
Let me thank everybody for the opportunity to speak here. My wife is actually a graduate of Morehead State. She got a bachelor's degree from here and a master's degree, and several members of your family also went to Morehead, your father and your brother as well. So she was excited about coming here. He hadn't been back in many years. And so we were able to walk around the campus a little bit, and she visited the bookstore and got an alumni t-shirt. But what I'm going to talk about today is, and you'll find most of this in this book. I've entitled this presentation, Himler of Himlerville in the World, because truly the man that established a coal mining camp in Martin County then was a product of the world. He is going to serve in the Army. In fact, he's going to enlist in the Army at the age of 55 and go through basic training. How somebody can do that, I don't know. I'm 59, I couldn't do it. But then he's assigned to the OSS, and he interrogates Nazi war criminals. He also did some relief work in North Africa and some work in Italy. So let me begin talking about Martin Himler and the little community he established in Martin County, Kentucky called Himlerville. This was the most unique community in the world. It was to, and I've been researching this for over 35 years, it was, so far as I can determine, one of only 2 cooperative coal mining communities in the world. Being a community in which the workers owned the mines. The other Himler established in West Virginia for a very brief time. But Himlerville was a big one. That community is now known as the town of Beauty. Working this. I said it stands for Martin Himler, a Hungarian Jew who migrated to the United States in 1907. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do now with that house. We call it the Himler Project. Kathy Corbett and Tom do more work on that probably than I do. We're trying to restore the house and make it into some kind of Hungarian and Appalachian cultural center in Martin County. Make it into a tourist attraction. There are lots of Hungarian communities in places like Cleveland, Ohio. In fact, Cleveland, I think, has the largest Hungarian community in the United States, and some organizations there have expressed interest in this. The Hungarian embassy has been involved. They sent 2 bands down, what was it, last April, Kathy? March. To do performances, to raise money to benefit the house. They also held the first annual Blues Festival in Washington, D.C. that raised, what was it, about $20,000 or so for restoration of the house. Now, we've got a long way to go. We need about $800,000 or so, and we're way, way short of that goal. And all proceeds from the sale of this book, the royalties Kathy and I get, that goes to restoration of the house too. We don't make a penny on this book. So let me then talk about a topic known as new immigration. Timber was a part of it. The New immigration was a transmigration, or transnational migration of peoples from about 1880 to 1915 to the United States. Approximately 20 million people came to the United States from all over the world. The bulk of these immigrants came from Southern and Eastern European countries. A few came from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. Now, if you look at the year 1820, immigration historians like myself say that that's a watermark in American history because the sources of immigrants changed. Before 1880, most immigrants came to the United States from the northern and western European countries: England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany. But then 1880, there was a big shift to southern Eastern European countries, and you have then Italians, Hungarians, Poles, Russians, Czechoslovakians, Romanians, Bulgarians, Croatians, Turks, Syrians. Most of the people called Syrian then were actually Lebanese, from what is now the country of Lebanon. It was under control of Syria then. You have Chinese, Japanese, and others. Most of these new immigrants settled in urban areas in the Northeast, Chicago, Boston, the Midwest, Detroit, Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, and some went into the western states, especially the Asian immigrants into San Francisco, Los Angeles, those places. A few, however, made their way to rural areas, including coal-producing regions in southern Appalachia, and that's what I've spent the better part of 35 years studying, is these immigrants in the coal fields of Appalachia. So let me talk about those a little bit, then I'll get into Himler and Himler. Coal-producing regions in West Virginia, Kentucky, all received substantial numbers of new immigrants after 1880. In total, 64,137 immigrants inhabited southern Appalachian coal mining counties in 1920, and this data comes from census records that I've looked at over the years. Most of these migrants came to West Virginia. West Virginia had a total of 58,759 immigrants living in these coal-producing counties, according to the census of 1920. Lesser numbers of immigrants came to Virginia and Kentucky. In Virginia, southwestern coal-producing regions of Buchanan, Dickinson, Lee, Russell, Scott, Tazewell, Wise, and you say, I'm originally from Buchanan County, Virginia, and then moved to Tazewell County when I was 11 years old. Those areas contain 2,873 immigrants, according to the 1910 census. Eastern Kentucky coal counties, including Bell, Breathitt, Clay, Floyd, Harlan, Johnson, Knott, Knox, Lawrence, Lee, Leslie, Letcher, Coffin, Martin, Perry, Pike, and Whitley, got about 3,625 immigrants, according to the 1920 census. Now, the immigration to Kentucky came generally a little bit later than it did to Virginia and West Virginia. It really came from Pennsylvania, southward into West Virginia, then southward into Virginia, and then westward into Kentucky as the coal fields opened. Coal fields in Eastern Kentucky opened a little bit later than those in West Virginia and Virginia opened. West Virginia coal fields began to open around about 1880. The Virginia coal fields about 10 years later, and then the Kentucky coal fields didn't open, at least in Eastern Kentucky, until about 1910. Now, Western Kentucky coal fields were open earlier, but since it's not the Appalachian region, I don't really do much with the Western Kentucky coal fields. But there was a substantial number of these new immigrants in Eastern Kentucky. In terms of the ethnic groups, the Italians were the largest. Eastern Kentucky contained about 812 Italians. Hungarians, the group that settled in Himlerville, was the second largest. There were about 762 Hungarian immigrants. Poles were the third largest ethnic group. About 312 Polish immigrants came to Eastern Kentucky. About 279 Yugoslavian immigrants. About 237 Russian immigrants came. About 182 Austrian immigrants. About 147 Czechoslovakian immigrants. about 114 Mexican immigrants, and then you have just a mixture of other ethnic groups that the census sometimes doesn't identify. About 780 of those could, one or two immigrants that didn't identify, nobody knew what their ethnicity was, and they didn't identify themselves. They were probably Syrian, Turkish, Hebrew, Bulgarian. Nobody knows for sure. They're just listed as other in census records and mining department report records where these numbers come from. How did these immigrants get here? Why? Well, there are a number of reasons, a number of ways. Most of these immigrants were recruited by coal mine owners. Coal operators in eastern Kentucky and throughout southern Appalachia faced a tremendous shortage of labor. And they would send agents into cities like New York, where most of these immigrants got off the boat at, to recruit workers. Now, that's how Mark Himler came to West Virginia first to work in a coal mine. He was recruited by a labor agent in New York City. Now, that was illegal. Congress had passed a law that made recruitment of immigrant labor illegal, but that didn't stop the coal mine owners. They did it anyway. They came on a system called, the coal mine owners called on transportation. These labor agents would approach immigrants like Mark Himler, and they would offer them a job, and they would say, we will pay you in transportation, provide your room and board to whatever coal camp you're going to come to in eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, eastern Tennessee, sometimes even in northern Alabama. Well, once these immigrants got there, as Mark Himler, he talks about this in his book, he finds that the transportation and the board is not free, that the coal mine owners are going to hold the transportation and the room and board out of his pay. And that's one reason, if you read the book, you'll see that Himler doesn't work very long in his first coal mine, because he finds out it's going to be about 3 months before he actually earns any money, because it's all going to go for expenses and well, the company holds about a month's pay back. And then they take about a month for expenses, transportation from New York to West Virginia, and so he decides to leave. He doesn't feel that's very fair, and that was a common practice for immigrants. Another reason that, that the coal mine owners called the transportation, on transportation, the Italian immigrants, the immigrant community called the Padrone system, in which the coal mine owners would use a labor agent. The labor agent would recruit the workers, but the labor agent then often cheated the workers as well, because most of the immigrants didn't speak English. And the labor agent would charge the coal mine owner a fee for each worker that the agent recruited, but the immigrant didn't know that the agent was getting paid a fee, and so the agent then would turn around and charge the immigrant a fee, usually first month's salary. Newspaper ads are another way that immigrants got into the Appalachian coal mines. There was a thriving foreign language press, as we're going to see if you read the book. Martin Himler makes his fortune really as a publisher. He opens a Hungarian language newspaper called Magyar Banszlap. I guess I'm saying it right. I don't speak Hungarian, so I don't know for sure, but it's what it sounds like. And he took advertisements in that paper from coal mine owners advertising work in mines. And there were about every ethnic group, the Italians, the Hungarians, Germans, Czechoslovakians, practically every ethnic group had their own foreign language newspapers. Published in the United States, written in their language, they could read. And so these coal mine owners would often advertise in those newspapers for workers. And so many of those immigrants answered those ads and arrived in Appalachia. Labor agents I talked about already. Relatives were another way. Once a coal mine worker, an immigrant, arrived in Appalachia, they would often send for relatives. And coal mine owners would often pay an immigrant worker a fee if they could write to the old country and convince some of their relatives to come and work in the coal mine. And so a lot of immigrant workers came that way, and practically every female immigrant came as a result of recruitment by relatives. Now, females didn't work in the coal mines in the 1910s, 1920s, but they operated the boarding houses, as Himler talks about in this book. There were immigrant boarding houses, and I'll talk a little bit more about those further on the presentation, in almost every coal camp. And it was usually the wife of some immigrant coal miner who would operate the boarding house, and she would sometimes cook and clean and wash clothes for maybe as many as 20 to 30 boarders at one time. And probably, Himler makes a case in this book that these immigrant women actually, he said, were as much responsible for the creation of the United States than anything else, because of the hard work they did in these boarding houses. And he's probably right. Once these immigrants came to Appalachia, they're going to create a unique community. They're going to rely on old world institutions that they bring with them to adapt to life in Appalachia. And I'm going to talk about a few of these institutions. One of it was they created ethnic communities. And the ethnic community centered around what was called the boarding boss system. So what was the boarding boss system? Well, immigrants would often rent houses in coal camps. And they would rent rooms then in those houses to immigrants from their own nationality. So if you were Italian and you rented a boarding house or rented a house in a coal camp, then that house had 3 bedrooms. You might rent, you see, I put 3 or 4 beds in each room, and you would rent then that bed to some other Italian worker who needed a place to stay in the coal camp. And your wife then would cook and clean, wash clothing, that sort of thing for those miners. And every coal camp had these ethnic boarding houses. I did a lot of work in Harlan County back in the 1980s interviewing immigrants, and I interviewed at the county of Carroll, Kentucky. I interviewed a husband and wife who'd operated a boarding house, Pete and T-I-B-I-N, Tabian, can't pronounce her name. And he was a son of a Russian immigrant, and she was the son of a Polish immigrant, and they had married. Their families both operated boarding houses, and Ann talked about working hard in those boarding houses. I interviewed another immigrant in the town of Harlan itself, Tony Funey, and his wife Bessie. And Bessie worked in a boarding house in Western Virginia, and she talks about working extremely hard in that interview. And she talks about, getting up way before daylight and cooking breakfast for those boarders, and then packing their lunch buckets to take them to the mines with them, that sort of thing. But the boarding boss system was a way that immigrants tried to recreate life in the old world, in the ethnic community. They spoke their own language. They dressed in native costume and ate native food and that sort of thing. And that's why they wanted to live in these boarding houses. They also brought with them their own unique religion. Most of these immigrants who came were Roman Catholic, and the people of Himlerville were Roman Catholic. Himmler was Jewish, but he converted to Catholicism, and most of the immigrants there were Catholic. But you see for the first time Catholic churches being built in eastern Kentucky. Some of these immigrants were Eastern Orthodox. You would occasionally have an Eastern Orthodox church. A few were Jewish. You would occasionally have a synagogue, but most were Roman Catholic. They go in to consume large amounts of alcohol. Often trouble's going to develop. You read old newspaper articles from Eastern Kentucky, there are going to be raids on immigrant houses where alcohol was stored. Now, Himmler did not allow alcohol in his community. He would kick people out. He actually kicked people out of that town for selling alcohol and buying alcohol. But it was probably most mining camps because immigrants they didn't like the moonshine native to Eastern Kentucky. They wanted wine, that sort of thing. And I've run across articles and in some of those interviews, immigrants talk about importing grapes, railroad boxcar full of time from Cincinnati because they wanted to make wine out of it. They didn't like to see the native drink made in Eastern Kentucky. They're going to speak their own language. If you're Italian, you said you speak Italian. If you're Hungarian, you speak Hungarian. They wear their own clothing. They celebrate their ethnic holidays. Now, most of these immigrants refer to these holidays as big saints' days. Most of them centered around the life of some saint or something. Coal mine operators didn't like this. Coal mine operators didn't like it because they thought that these immigrants got drunk on these holidays. They wouldn't show up for work the next day. So to combat that, the coal mine owners would send what they called shack rousters, or what the immigrants called shack rousters. Shack rouster was basically a thug armed with a gun and clubs, and if the worker didn't show up to work that day, the shack rouster would go and knock on the door and get the worker up. If the worker didn't answer the door, they'd kick the door down and go in and drag the worker out of bed, dress him in his bank clothes or mining clothes, and take him to work. And Bessie Funick said in an interview I did with her, those shack rousters, she put were mean men. Now let me talk about Himlerville. Himlerville was probably the most, said, unique of all eastern Kentucky coal mining towns, and unique coal mining town in the United States and in the world. Said it's one of only two cooperative coal mining towns that I know of, and I've been researching this for over 35 years. It was, I said before, a cooperative coal mining town where the workers actually owned the coal company they worked for, and they owned the town they lived in. I said before, it was established by Martin Himler, Hungarian immigrant, came to the United States in 1907. All miners working and living at Himlerville were Hungarian immigrants who bought stock in the Himler Coal Company. Himler himself owned less than 3% of the company's stock. The majority of stockholders were common miners or immigrants living elsewhere in American cities who hoped to one day move to Himlerville if employment opportunities opened in the mine there. There were several thousand shareholders that only about 200 or 300 of them actually lived in Himlerville because that's all the mine could accommodate. But you have several thousand outside, and there was a waiting list. They were wanting to come to Himlerville. As of July 1921, Himler Coal Company stock was held in such small allotments that it took 450 of the largest lots to form a 51% majority. The stock originally sold for $100 a share. Within a few years, it had risen to about $140 per share. And I'm getting this information, well, the $100 per share is documented. The $140 number comes from interviews that I had done years ago with an immigrant who lived in Himlerville. He said that he bought some for $100. Within a few years, he said it went to $140 a share. Now that's a photograph of Himlerville in the 1920s. That's what it looked like. That photograph is probably taken up on the hill where I guess the road is now. It looks like the road goes around there now. That's what it looked like there. Kathy probably helped me out. Is that the store?
It's a store.
And what is that?
That's a boarding house.
Okay, a boarding house and
That's for something like this.
The what?
The bank.
the bank. Okay, I've got more pictures of that. And the miners' houses through here. There's an opera house somewhere, a clubhouse in the community. So who was Martin Himler? Well, as I said before, he was a Hungarian Jew. He seemed to resent being Jewish when he was growing up, probably because of discrimination he faced. His father was an Orthodox Jew, and in Hungary he faced a lot of discrimination. He was born in a little town, I don't know how to pronounce that, Pesto, I guess, in 1888. His sister got married. He was about 3 or 4 years old. The first thing he remembered was her wedding. On the wedding day, then the family moved to Makerabelli, and I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation of that, operated a saloon in 1892. Himmler seemed to be, according to his autobiography, a ne'er-do-well in Hungary. He didn't seem to fit in very well. That's a theme constantly throughout the autobiography. He doesn't fit in well until he gets to the OSS, the Army, and he says he seems to fit in better there. First time he ever felt comfortable in his life. But he was very intelligent, but he was like many of my students, he didn't attend class regularly. And he was kicked out of what I guess would amount to high school for bad behavior, mainly not attending class. But the very year he was dismissed from school, he was the best student in terms of Hungarian literature. So he had some academic aptitude, he just didn't want to go to school, whatever reason. He worked for a while. He quit a job in Hungary because he wanted a raise. His boss didn't give him a raise, and so he quit a pretty good paying job. His family didn't like that, and he decided that he was going to immigrate to the United States. Now, part of the reason he immigrated, I think, is because he quit that job and he wanted economic opportunity, but then he'd also, and I may be being redundant here, I may get it out a little bit later, I forget. But he had met a young woman who was a cash higher than he was, and he couldn't marry her because her family wouldn't permit it. And that's part of why I think he decided to go to the United States, because he wanted to escape a love that he could have ever had. He decided to, when he came to the United States, he worked his way as a server on board the steam passenger ship, the SS Carpathia, and he was supposed to be paid $16 for his labor. Now, the SS Carpathia was the ship that picked up the survivors of the Titanic. Now, that was after Himler, I think. But when Himler arrived in New York, he was supposed to receive $16. He got 9 cents. That's the money he had when he arrived, because the ship captain kept almost all the money because Himler had broken some dishes on the way over because of waves and seasickness and that sort of thing. So he went through customs in New York with 9 cents. He was supposed to have, I think, at least $10, but they let him through anyway because he told them he had a relative waiting. He had a cousin supposed to be waiting on him, and the cousin had lied about his success to the folks back home. And so he was ashamed, apparently, so he didn't show up to meet him at the dock, so Himler was all alone. That's a photograph of Himler working at his desk in April of 1940. Probably working at Major Urbanian's lab. And he published some other publications too, but that was his big one. The cousin didn't show up. Beat him at the dock. Himler desperate for work because he had 9 cents, and you're not going to get very far 9 cents in a new country, language you don't speak. And so he had to find work. Well, he saw an advertisement in some kind of Hungarian language newspaper about miners needed in West Virginia, and that advertisement told him to meet a labor agent at a saloon in New York. And so he went there, and he found out he could also get free food there. He would buy beer. In those days, saloons gave free food, sandwiches, that sort of thing. And so he, made use of that institution quite liberally in his early days. But he met the labor agent there, and the labor agent put him on board a train, did this on transportation I talked about earlier. He put Himler on board a train and sent Himler to a place called Thacker, West Virginia. As I said, again, these labor agents and coal companies sort of lied to the immigrants, saying that your transportation would be provided. Well, they deducted that transportation from the immigrants' pay, and Himler figured out after 3 or 4 days that he wasn't going to get any money until about 3 months had passed, and so he didn't work very long. But he found the work in Thacker hard, and Himler also was probably not suited to that kind of work because he was a relatively small individual, and he says that the work in the coal mines was among the hardest work he ever did in his life. But he left a couple of other immigrants after a few days seeking work elsewhere. He would later work in other mines in Aspen, Pennsylvania, and Gary, West Virginia. Now, Gary, West Virginia had a big coal mine, sort of like Lynch, Kentucky, was owned by United States Steel. If you've been in Carroll County, Lynch was the largest coal camp, I think, in the United States, and it was owned by U.S. Steel. Gary, West Virginia, I think, was as well. Produced steel for U.S. Steel factories in Pittsburgh, just as the Lynch mine in Carroll County did. But Himler went north into Ohio, eventually back to New York, where he worked at a variety of jobs. He worked at a steel mill. He worked as a cobbler. He worked on a street paving crew. He helped dig the subway tunnel, McAdoo Tunnel in New York City. He worked other manual labor jobs. He eventually found a pretty good job with a cobbler who made repaired shoes. Himler convinced the man to buy factory-made shoes and sell them in the store. The cobbler didn't like that idea, but then Himler convinced him to do that, and it made them more money than they'd ever made. And Himler began really to get established somewhat, get money to begin to do other things from working with this cobbler in this shoe store and convincing the guy to sell factory-made shoes rather than make shoes. Himler eventually left the shoe business to become a pack peddler. Anybody know what a pack peddler is? Pack peddler was very important in Appalachia in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s. They were salespeople, came from places like New York, and they would carry big packs on their back, or they would carry 2 or 3 suitcases of all kinds of merchandise. So there were not many stores in eastern Kentucky, southwestern Virginia, West Virginia, eastern Tennessee. And these people would carry these suitcases, big packs. They would go around and sell the wares to households in Appalachia. Himler made a lot of money doing that. He began to outfit other pack peddlers. And he then began to publish a newspaper. He was selling, he was in Holden, West Virginia. He wrote the first issue of what became his most successful venture, Magyar Bányászlap. He decided that he could, that the Hungarian immigrants needed a newspaper for miners only. And other newspaper publishers laughed at him when he got the idea to call it Magyar Bányászlap, translated into English as the Hungarian Miner Journal. They dubbed him a Parliament and said, why do these immigrants need their own newspaper? This newspaper wouldn't succeed. Well, within a few months, this newspaper had about 60,000 subscribers. And it was self-supporting. And according to the masthead, this newspaper was the largest circulating Hungarian language newspaper in the United States for many years. Now, it's going to be published from about 1916 or 1913 until about 1954, I believe. It's going to be published in several places. It's going to be published, first of all, in New York City. Then it's published in Himlerville, Kentucky, which is now the town of Beauty, Kentucky. And then it's published when Himler leaves Beauty and Himlerville and goes to he goes to Columbus, Ohio. It's published there for a while, and then it's published in Detroit, Michigan. And his nephew carries on the publication after Himler enlisted in the Army in 1942. This publication is going to contain articles about mining. It contains articles about the old country, Hungary. It contained articles about life in America, along with advertisements and Hungarian language dictionary. Things that Himler thought, you see, the Hungarian immigrants needed. By 1917, Himler was a prosperous publisher and began to publish other newspapers and magazines. Here's a photograph of the front page of an issue of Magyar Bányászlap. Now, I've got sort of an interesting story about that. When I was a graduate student working on a master's PhD at UK, I searched and searched and searched for this newspaper. And I searched probably for 2 or 3 years trying to find it, because I was told that it was published in both English and Hungarian. And so I couldn't find it, and I looked on the Hungarian Miner Journal, went to the library at MIT, and went through. We didn't have computers then, we used the art catalogs and other research, basic books, journals, and I looked for the Hungarian Miner Journal. I never found a clue. I searched every once in a week or so in that library. And finally, then I ran across Hungarian name somewhere. Magyar Bányászlap went the first thing I looked in the card catalog had Magyar Bányászlap, and it was in a library in Chicago. And so I got in a library loan through MIT to get me all the copies of that newspaper for the 1920s, time Himlerville was active. And so I had about 20 big volumes, those newspapers, bound. Went on microfilm and microfiche, since the computers didn't exist in those days. And so I carried them up, made several trips to the MIT library. I had an office on 17th floor, Patterson office, Carroll, UK. I carried those magazines up there, or those newspapers up there, and those the first one. It was all Hungarian. I couldn't read them. Couldn't read. So I went to the dean and asked the dean to give me a grant to get something translated. Well, nobody in the UK didn't have a Hungarian language department, and the closest was Indiana University, but there was a secretary in the German department who was Hungarian could translate. So I went to her, and she wanted $20 a page. Of course, I was a poor graduate student from Southwest Virginia. I couldn't pay $20 a page to get that translated, so I had to send the journals back without being able to read them. And I'm convinced today we can get those translated. There are all kinds of information in those journals about Himler that I'd love to read. So hopefully we can somehow get that newspaper translated, at least the Himlerville years translated. Himler then in 1917 decided to become a coal baron. He, along with several other Hungarian immigrants, opened the first cooperative coal mine on a small property in Ajax, West Virginia. This mine was too small, and they decided to move to a larger property in Kentucky. On June 24, 1919, Himler leased several thousand acres of coal land from a Cincinnati land company and formed the Himler Coal Company. He advertised for sale shares of stock in Magyar Bányászat. Within a short time, several thousand shares of stock had sold at $100 per share. Himmler had funds then to begin construction of his coal mining town that would be named Himlerville in his honor. Now, he didn't name the town, he said in the Autobiography, Himlerville. They had to get a post office, and a friend of his who made application to the federal government, the postal service, for a post office, named it Himlerville. Here's a picture of the front side of the stock certificate that Himmler sold. Build that town. And that's the back side of it. One thing that the miners had to do was to build a railroad bridge to get coal in. This mining operation was right across Tug River from West Virginia, and Himler had to raise money then to build a bridge. Well, they raised money, thought they were going to be able to build the bridge for something like $75,000 or so. They hit quicksand where the engineers told them it was solid bedrock, had to go down further and had to raise quite a bit more money. The bridge ended up costing $300,000, about 3 times, a little bit more than what it was supposed to cost. But the L&N Railroad laid tracks across the bridge, and the Himler Coal Company was then able to ship its coal to outside markets. May 21st, 1921, the first N&W train crossed the bridge into Martin County, and a gala celebration was held there. And there was a good article in the Huntington, West Virginia newspaper in May of 1921 that talks about this celebration and the arrival of the first train in Martin County. Now that's a relatively recent photograph of the bridge. Still standing, still exists. When I first came there in the 1980s, all grown up. It's a boat dock, I think, near now, but you couldn't hardly get to it when I first came there and took pictures of it back about 1982 or something around there. Last time I was there a couple of years ago, that it was in nice shape. The mine itself was one of the most modern in Kentucky at the time. Mined the Warfield coal seam, which averaged 5 feet thick at the mine face. Coal seam was undercut by 3 50-horsepower Goodman short-wall machines, and holes which explosives were inserted to blast coal from the face were made with high-powered drills. The mine was electrically lighted. Coal was hand-loaded into buggies that were transported to Tipple by the Ironton storage battery locomotives. The mine was ventilated by electric fans, and most equipment was operated with electricity. This was unusual for a mine, because most mines did not. Most mines used animals, small horses, small ponies, small mules to haul coal out to the Tipple, and most were not ventilated at all. You have a lot of explosions, a lot of gas building up because the federal government didn't regulate mining nearly as much in the 1920s as it does today. That's the mine entrance. That's a photograph from inside the mine. Now, I thought I had a picture of the Tipple in here, probably do somewhere else. In terms of employment, the Himler mine, and I'm getting this information from the Kentucky Department of Mining records. They kept records of every mine. The Himler mine employed 228 men in 1923. Of this number, 180 worked inside the mine tunnel, and the rest worked outside the Tipple or in the power plant. The miners averaged over 200 working days per year. Again, this comes from Department of Mine records. In 1926, the mine operated 277 days. Miners generally went to work at about 4 a.m. and they left around 7 p.m. It's a long work day. You know, we probably couldn't imagine working days that long in mines today. My father was a coal miner, and, they would work, till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and go to work maybe around 7 o'clock or so in the morning. Much different, the 1960s and 70s present time than it was in the 1920s. The work was dangerous. The mining department records indicate that a number of miners were actually killed or injured in the Himlerville mine. That records of every person, the names of the miners were killed in those records. Workers were paid wages and dividends according to Stockdale. They received double income. They were paid dividends. If the company made a profit, they received dividends on the stock they owned, just as you would today if you buy stock. And then they also received wages, just as a normal miner would, for the amount of coal that they loaded or produced, or how they were paid. Some were paid by the ton. The company did issue scrip for miners to use the company store. Now, I've got sort of an interesting story about this. The first article I wrote and published on Himlerville was in 1992. It was published in the Filson Club History Quarterly. And I had made a comment, a statement in that article that Himmler did not issue scrip to miners that other companies in Eastern Kentucky did. And 3 or 4 days after that article appeared, I got a letter from a reader who said, "No, you're wrong." He sent me a picture of a piece of script from the Himler Coal Company, and the information I had, the sources I had, it said Himler didn't issue script. Well, that was wrong. He obviously did. Here's a photograph of a piece of script from the Himler Coal Company. You can get this stuff sometimes on the internet. It's cost, what did Dwayne pay for it?
They paid in the hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, several $100s for it. It's pretty expensive. If you're a script collector, I didn't know there were script collectors, but apparently there are. It's some of the most rare script today. If you're a script collector, you can buy, but several $100s. The tipple cost $100,000 to process 2,500 tons of coal in 8 hours. Coal was automatically sorted into various sizes by use of shaker screens, and coal bugs could be turned 180 degrees to empty their contents without being uncoupled from the string of cars. Here's the picture of the coal tip. I thought I had one in here somewhere. That's what it looked like in its heyday, 1920s. That's what it looked like inside. Screens, conveyor belt. That was a modern operation for the time. Most of these coal tippers in the 1920s weren't anywhere near that modern. They built a power plant to produce electricity. And that building, I think, is still standing. The old power plant is still standing here, but one of the few buildings still left. It was modern in every respect. It contained 5 boilers, 200 horsepower each, that generated enough electricity to run the mines and lighthouses in Himlerville and surrounding areas. The power plant cost $150,000, and it was the first commercial production of and use of electricity in Martin County. All houses in Himlerville had electrical lighting, and mountain residents living outside Himlerville could hook onto the Himlerville system if they desired. So that was unusual for a coal camp in the 1920s. A lot of those did not have electricity at that time. That's a photograph inside the power plant. See some of the, I guess, the generators, the transformers over there. Here, I'm not sure. I guess that's what they are. There's probably a generator there, like the Albertson. Town contained a number of buildings. Had a company store. I think we've got pictures of some of these a little bit later. It contained a bank, a doctor's office, clubhouse and library, opera house, which was the largest building in town. It could seat 800 people. There were a number of miners' houses. There was a bakery, boarding houses, Himler's house, which is the house we're going to try to restore, and I've got a picture of what it looks like now and what we want to make it look into someday to the end of this presentation. That's the store. Now the store burned down, I think. When I was there in the 1980s, early 1980s, it was still there. It looked like that. You did a picture I found with stone gutters here. I've never seen that in a coal camp before that I visited. That's the bank. It It was called the Martin Himler State Bank. It's still standing. They've had some more built onto it now, I think, and what a church something, I believe now, it's some kind of conference for charity, I believe, or kind of,
Catholic church.
yeah, Catholic church. I think it's a clothing bank or something there now. When this bank failed, at the beginning of the Great Depression, right before, that bank there was an article in the New York Times newspaper. I did research on this. I found that article in the New York Times newspaper about that bank, and the article said that not a saver lost a dime when that bank went under at the beginning, right before the Great Depression. But can you imagine a bank in Eastern Kentucky noting a mention, an article in the New York Times newspaper in 1927, 28 or something, somewhere around there, I forget the date of the article. That's Miner's house for some of them. That's Himler's house on the hill we're trying to preserve. That's the house. It looked much better then than it does now. It's pretty, a lot of it's fallen down now. We had snow a couple of winters ago and collapsed the roof under the roof. That's, I probably showed you that picture earlier, you know, the store and the bank, and you see the miners' houses going up here. That's another photograph. Let's see, is that the Opera House?
That is the Opera House.
That's the Opera House. That's the largest building in town. One of the 800, where they had plays, and sometimes you have performers from outside, opera performers, Hungarian actors and actresses visit Himlerville and do performances. That's more minor houses. More. Those pictures of residents of Himlerville near the railroad. I found that somewhere on the internet. Those residents, two young couples, probably courting or recently married, don't know which, lived in Himlerville. That's a family that lived in Himlerville in the 1920s. In terms of entertainment, Himmler didn't allow entertainment with alcohol. He didn't allow drinking of wine, liquor, beer in Himlerville because Himmler personally opposed drinking, and because the 1920s was the time of national prohibition, Himmler certainly didn't want to violate the law. In fact, as I told you, my research indicated he kicked some minors out because they were bootlegging, and he didn't allow that in the 1920s, so he just simply made them sell their shares of stock back to the company, fired them, and sent them on their way. Had a library. The library had books, journals in both Hungarian and English. Had a clubhouse, meetings, socialization took place there, and a pool hall. Had a baseball team. Baseball was popular in East Kentucky in the coal camps, and they would play each other. And the Himlerville or Himler Coal Company sponsored a baseball team. In fact, sometimes coal mine owners would hire workers because they were good baseball players. Tony Fudic, the immigrant that I interviewed, the Yugoslavian immigrant in Harlan County, he was a section foreman at Lynch, and he said sometimes the United Coal and Coal Company or U.S. Steel Dome Lynch would hire workers because they could play baseball well and they wanted good baseball players. And Tony says, and Tony had spoken very broken English, he said they don't make them work much. He said they play baseball pretty hard. And I don't know where, I doubt that Himler did that, but they had a baseball team. I don't know a lot about the baseball team. I had a colleague for a while who taught history with me who did his master's thesis on baseball, coal company baseball teams. And he wrote a little bit, I think, about the Himlerville team at the University of Kentucky. The Opera House served the center of the town's entertainment. There was a Hungarian Literary Society that staged amateur plays. Members of this society paid monthly dues, returned for seasonal tickets. Many young people belonged to the organization. Occasionally, professional actors and actresses and singers performed at the Himlerville Opera House. Native Appalachians also performed in plays along with Hungarians. Dances would be held there, but probably the most common dance was known as Hungarian Great Dance. I've interviewed immigrants in a number of coal towns throughout Eastern Kentucky in the 1980s, and I bet you 10 or 12 of them tell me about the Hungarian Great Dance. They really liked it, and how it worked, they said that grapes and other fruit would be suspended from the ceiling of the dance floor, and that the female dancing partner would try to convince her male partner to steal fruit for her. And if the male was caught stealing fruit, then deputies took him to a corner of the room and fined him according to his perceived ability to pay. And of course, the money was then donated to charity, because it was all in good fun. And the dancers were always caught. They intended to get caught when they got the fruit. But I don't know how many of these immigrants told me about that dance. They remembered it very fondly. In terms of education, Himlerville School was probably the best in Eastern Kentucky at the time. Certainly one of the best in all of Kentucky, both elementary and high school. It had one of the longest terms in Kentucky. The average term in rural Kentucky in the 1920s was 7 months. The Martin County Board of Education funded a 7-month term, and the Himler Coal Company paid for an additional 3 months of education for its children. So these kids got 3 more months of schooling than people in most areas of rural Kentucky got. Himler employed only teachers who had college degrees at a time when some teachers in Kentucky lacked a high school education. Each child was required to study the Hungarian language and heritage along with English, American government, American history, math, science, geography, and other classes. The Himlerville schools taught evening classes in English and American history, taught for adult residents. Himmler insisted that all Himlerville residents work toward American citizenship, and most of them got their citizenship papers. Himmler also the immigrants faced much racism and prejudice. And I have a lot of interviews with various immigrants who talk about this racism and prejudice. Himlerville is not immune from the racism. It was common in Eastern Kentucky, common throughout the nation. In the 1920s, mine owners often housed immigrants and blacks in houses near creeks, as those houses flooded during rainy periods. American miners were housed higher on the hill in many coal camps. In fact, some of these people told me that coal camps consisted of 3 layers. At the bottom of the hill, on the creeks, you have immigrants and blacks. And the people told me that because that area flooded. And so those are people going to get washed away in the flood. Their houses, their property get damaged. But then in the middle of the hill, you had the white workers. And at the top of the hill, they called Silk Stocking Road, you had the mine bosses, the foremen, the mine owners. Because they weren't going to get flooded, you said. Immigrants were called derogatory names, such as Hunky, that's a name for Hungarian, Tally, that was a derogatory name for Italian, Dago, another derogatory name for Italians, Wops were Italians, Poles were called Polacks, Russians were called Ruskies. These people are often buried in cemeteries separated from whites and blacks. In Harlan County, for example, I visited a cemetery in Harlan County in which on one end of the field you have whites, and then you walk about probably the length of this library here, and you have then a cemetery for immigrants. That was common. Now, Himlerville, that didn't happen because it was a Hungarian community. All of them, in fact, the cemetery of Himlerville still exists, and it's directly opposite Himler's house on the hill. Himlerville itself was called Hunky Town, Hunkyville, or Little Hungary. Its location was often referred to as Hunky Hollow by whites living in the area, or Native Americans living in the area. Fights often broke out at baseball games, especially if the Himlerville team beat a team from a neighboring coal camp in an away game. Police and government officials often discriminated against immigrants. Himler talks about this in the pages of Major Banner's. Now, there were a few articles I could read. Occasionally there was one in English, but almost every one of those in English had something to do with discrimination by the police and government, especially in Huntington and Charleston, West Virginia. Himler apparently took on some of the police in Huntington, Charleston, who were fleecing immigrants and who were looking the other way at bootlegging operations and at prostitution operations. And he, as my friend James likes to say, put their business out in the street, published in his newspaper. Sort of thing. Said Himler fought back, published articles about this corruption in the newspaper. Himlerville, of course, didn't survive. It goes bankrupt. It went bankrupt because the coal industry was depressed largely in the 1920s. The first year of operation, Himler had a contract to supply the NNW with coal for the railroad, but then that contract wasn't renewed the second year, and the Himler mine, as with the other mines, had to sell coal on the spot market. Well, the coal industry was in such a slump during the 1920s, the price of coal continually fell, and the company could not cover production costs. Himler said in the Autobiography that they were selling coal, he and other coal companies, not just the Himler coal company, others too, were selling coal at far less than it cost to produce coal. And they hoped to hang on because he knew there was going to be a consolidation in the industry. Some weaker companies went out and they would be consolidated. He hoped that would cause the price of coal to go up. It never did. Compounding the Himler mine troubles is that they hit a large seam slate in the middle of the coal seam. And Himlerville coal got the reputation of being dirty, and a lot of industrial users would not want to use the coal, and Himler found it difficult to sell on the spot market. And so on May 22nd, 1925, the Himler Coal Company holding it placed it in receivership under orders of the United States Court of the Southern District of Ohio. The receivership tried to right the company for 3 years, but was unsuccessful. In January 1929, the Himler Coal Company was sold in public auction to Art Hewitt, a West Virginia coal operator, for $65,000. Hewitt also went bankrupt within a few years and sold his operations to J.H. Mann, another West Virginia coal baron. Mann went bankrupt as well, and one of the largest floods in Martin County history washed away much of the town in the fall of 1929. The schoolhouse and other housing burned, and the name of Himlerville was changed to Beauty. Now, there are several reasons that I've heard that Himlerville was changed to Beauty. One was because that the Hungarian, the town was so beautiful that people remarked about the flare and that sort of thing painted there, and that people, they changed the name to Beauty because it looks so good. Another tradition holds that it was changed to Beauty by Art Hewitt because Himlerville, the slate caused the Himlerville coal to get the reputation of being dirty and couldn't sell it, so he wanted to give it a different name and try to sell more coal. So I don't know which one is actually legitimate, maybe both of them, I don't know. But what did Himler do after Himlerville? Well, he moved to Columbus, Ohio in August 1929, and he moved Magyar Banyaslab, his newspaper, with him, where he published that paper for a time before he moved to Detroit, Michigan. Immediately after leaving Himlerville, Himler went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where he was treated for oral cancer. He says he arrived there with $4 in his pocket and had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses. Now, there's a tale that goes around that Himler absconded with all the company's money. That's just not true. The company was bankrupt and had no money for him to run off with. But a lot of people still to this very day believe that. Kathy and I were selling books, Kentucky Book Fair in Lexington, what was it, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago or so. And we had somebody come up and buy a book from us. He'd heard that too, that Himler ran off and took the money and joined the army. Immediately after, well, that didn't happen. He was treated for oral cancer and he had very little money. That's just a tale that people probably want to tell because they didn't know, didn't understand what happened there, that sort of thing. Himler survived the near collapse of the newspaper industry during the Great Depression in the 1930s, barely keeping Magyar Banyaslab going to face the kind of subscriptions advertising. For a time then, Himler would serve as the agent of a Midwestern railroad search for agricultural land on which to call out new immigrants. But Himmler's most success, at least in his mind, was when he became Colonel Martin Himler of the OSS, the Strategic Office of Strategic Services. I can't say it, can't get it out. When World War II broke out, Himler says he wanted to give something back to the United States. He says that the United States had offered him the opportunity to be successful over. He said he could never have done, he remained hungry, what he did in the United States. He'd never been successful because of the class system. And so he felt very grateful. So at the age of 55, therefore, he enlisted in the Army. He was assigned to the Office of Strategic Services, which was the forerunner of the modern CIA, because he could speak several languages, including German, Hungarian, and English. He spent time in North Africa helping displaced people there. He spent time in Italy. But his most unique work was interrogating Nazi war criminals in his native Hungary. He would question these criminals and determine whether they should be sent to trial for war crimes. A number of the criminals he interrogated were tried and hanged for the role in the Holocaust. And Himler, that's a photograph of Himler in Carroll, Himler. Himler had a number of his family members in Hungary, Jewish, perished in the Holocaust. They were sent by Hungarian Nazis to the concentration camps where they were worked until they starved to death, worked to death, or where they were gassed in the gas chamber, or medical experiments may have been performed on it, that sort of thing, by Nazi doctors. Himler interrogated some of these very same people who sent his family members to the death camps, and he says in the book that he didn't extract any justice for his family members. He said he didn't take any pride in doing what he did for revenge, but you know he probably must have felt some degree of satisfaction when he was able to interrogate these very same people who sent his family members to concentration camps. What was that? Two of his family members survived.
Two great nephews.
Two great nephews survived. All his brothers and sisters perished in the Holocaust. And he had, there were 13 people in his family, I think, one time in Hungary. Himmler wrote this autobiography after the Cold War, when McCarthyism, Joseph McCarthy, Senator Joseph McCarthy, and fear of communism was at a fever pitch in the United States. Himmler was an ardent foe of communism and feared that immigrants would be wrongfully branded as communists by Joseph McCarthy, Richard Nixon, and other politicians who were seeking publicity in high public office, accusing often false people of being communists. And so, if you read this autobiography, you're going to find that Himmler, not only hated Nazism, but he hated communism too. He thought communism was a grave danger to the United States. Himmler's personal life, he remained a bachelor his entire life, never married. He said in the autobiography that one regret he had was he never married and had children. He always wanted a large family, and he said he loved children. His heart was broken, as I said before, when he fell in love with a young Hungarian woman before he immigrated to the United States. He could not marry her because she was from a higher caste than he was. He never forgot her, and years later, during his time in Hungary with no SS, she approached him about helping find her a husband who was missing as a result of the war. Himmler learned that her husband had died in the war, but felt that he was too old to court and marry at the time in his life. When you read that autobiography, you want them to get together. You just know when she appears as often, you know that they're going to get together. And they don't. That's one of the most, I think, disappointing things for me, the autobiography, they never got together. Himmler converted to Roman Catholicism as a result of a young immigrant woman trying to trap him into marriage in New York. She told him that since they'd been romantically involved, he had to marry her, and Himmler was naive and believed that. And a Catholic official told him that there was no rule indicating that the person had to marry a woman because he had become romantically involved with her. That was a big relief, Himmler says, and so he converted to Catholicism for that reason, or at least sort of indicates that he may have. Himmler's later years were spent in California. He planned to retire from the Army to a small farm in California with several friends, and he even bought the land, and his best friend, who had been a miner in Himlerville, Johnny Bako, moved to California and began working the farm while Himmler was still in the Army. Unfortunately for Himmler was discharged from the Army, Bako died. Himmler sold the farm and moved to Los Angeles in 1957, where he lived the remainder of his life as a freelance writer. He died on July the 8th of 1961 of pancreatic and liver cancer. So in conclusion, Himmler's life was one that was well lived. He realized the American dream that most immigrants had and became a successful entrepreneur. Although his dream of establishing Himlerville as a cooperative coal mining town where Hungarians could live life in America surrounded by an Arab Magyar culture, Magyar just means Hungarian, was not fully realized, Himmler gave much to his adopted country. His service to the OSS in World War II was extremely valuable. In fact, he interrogated personally what was it, about 40 Nazi war criminals, and those records have disappeared from the archives. Nobody knows what happened to them. We'd love to see them, but we haven't been able to find them.
They also were stolen from Hungary.
Pardon?
They also.
We think probably the government did them stolen. We don't know who they're gone. And so, you know, throughout his life, he had to fight racism and prejudice. He first had to fight against discrimination against Jews in his native Hungary, and later against immigration restrictions in the United States as exhibited in the National Origins Act of 1921 and its revision in 1924 and 1927. See, these acts, 1921 was the first immigration restriction in the United States. Immigrants could come to the United States free up until 1921, and then the government began to restrict, and they put a quota system in that restricted the number of immigrants based on the number of that ethnic group already here. And only maybe 800 or so Hungarians were allowed in every year after that. Himmler really wanted to show Americans that immigrants had a place in American society could contribute greatly to the American economy. I think that's why he established Himlerville. This is what the Himler house looks like today. You see, it's in real bad shape. This is what it looked like when it was new, and that's what we want to bring it back to. We could raise enough money to do so. That's the front porch of the house when it was new. And that looks like probably the dining room or view of the dining room when the house was new. And so that concludes my presentation. I'll be glad to entertain questions. If anybody has questions. You know, if any of you know somebody rich who wants to fund restoration of that house, put them in touch with us. We'll be glad to talk to them. Anybody have any questions? Not, then let me thank you for listening to me for probably about an hour. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. I just have a couple closing comments. The manuscript was held in the hands of the Himler family for all these years, and they donated the royalties of the book sales to the restoration of the Himler house. Kathy Cassidy Corbin, the editor, Doug Cantrell, and Charles Benavesi all donated their time and effort to the autobiography. And if you've got time, books will be for sale, and you can meet the speaker and the editor. One final note, the United States Army Historical Foundation's 2018 Distinguished Book Award has been, this book has been nominated for that. So thank you, folks, and have a safe evening out there.
You don't know who Charles Benavesi is? He is a reporter, a former reporter for the Washington Post.